Hi guys, welcome back to CRYPTID'S Den. I want to thank you, truly, for walking this path with me. For not just watching, but feeling alongside the stories we tell here. Your presence, your thoughts, your quiet understanding. It's what gives this place heart. It means the world to know you're out there, sharing in the wonder, the mystery, and sometimes even the sorrow. Let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe and drop a comment. You're a part of this journey. Now, let's get into it. Do you believe in Bigfoot? In 1994, deep inside a remote Wyoming wildlife reserve, I witnessed something that shattered every myth I thought I knew. A lion cub, helpless and trapped in the grip of a massive python, its cries tearing through the stillness, while its parents watched, frozen in fear. And then, from the shadows of the forest, he appeared. Not a monster, a guardian, Bigfoot, towering, ancient, but with eyes that held a soul. He fought the serpent and saved the cub, then vanished without a trace. I spent 8 months digging into forgotten field notes, ranger recordings, and one soldier's journal. What I found? Proof. That same creature rescued a man named Eldon Rourke, an old veteran who once lost his son in these woods and later gave everything to protect what most would hunt. In this video, I'll show you what really happened in Hollow Ridge, the secret of Silent Valley, why Eldon was carried through fire, and why Bigfoot might not be legend, but legacy. Stay with me, because if you leave now, all you'll get is another tabloid headline. But if you stay, you'll see a truth few ever do. I still hear that roar in my bones. It wasn't just loud. It tore the air open, split the stillness of the noon like lightning on dry ground. Everything froze. The birds, the wind, even the sun seemed to pause behind a cloud that wasn't there. That's the first thing I remember, the silence that followed. The kind that makes your skin crawl before you even know why. I was standing just outside the southern ridge, near where the tall grass dips into a tree line of old acacias. Hollow Ridge looks peaceful in the summer, like it's trying to make you forget it's hiding something. The heat shimmered off the yellow fields, a few grasshoppers clicking, dust hovering mid-air. I was out for a walk, just stretching my legs, they say, but in truth, I'd been drifting for hours, chasing a quiet I couldn't seem to find anywhere else. That's when I saw it. A lion cub, not more than a few months old, golden and clumsy, bounding after a grasshopper like it was the first game it ever played. The little guy zigzagged through sunlight so bright it made the dust sparkle, his paws too big for his body, eyes wide with the joy of the chase. He had no clue he was alone, no clue how far he'd wandered. That's the cruelty of innocence. It doesn't come with a warning sign. I stepped closer, careful not to make noise. Something about him felt wrong. Not the cub, but the stillness. The way the light hung too long, like it was holding its breath. And that grass, it was too still, like something waiting just underneath. Then it came. Not a sound, not a hiss, just a blur from the underbrush. A blur that turned into muscle and scale, and the sudden violent whip of a tail thick as a tire. The python launched, big as a damn thigh, longer than any snake I'd ever seen in my life, and coiled around that cub before it could blink. The cub screamed. Not the roar of a lion, no. This was raw panic. A cry that clawed through the trees and ripped into my gut. He thrashed, kicked, tried to claw his way free, but that thing squeezed tighter, folding him into its coils like it was wringing out life itself. And, for a moment, just a blink, my knees gave out. Because behind me, I heard more growls. Deeper, older. The parents. 2 adult lions had appeared at the edge of the trees. I don't know how I didn't see them arrive. They were statues, muscles drawn tight, tails twitching, eyes fixed on the snake strangling their cub. But they didn't move. Not a paw, not a sound. Their faces were frozen between rage and fear. and something worse. Helplessness. I wanted to scream at them. Do something, it's your child. But I didn't. I couldn't, because I knew that look too well. And then everything changed. A shadow shifted behind the acacia. Not fast, not sudden, slow. Heavy, like the forest itself had taken a step forward. I turned and saw it. At first, just a shape, taller than a man, covered in thick, earth-matted fur, stepping out into the light like it belonged there. Shoulders wide, chest heaving like a bellows, and those eyes, those dark, knowing eyes that didn't look like an animal's at all. Bigfoot, I swear on my mother's grave. It was him. Not a monster, not a myth, not what the magazines or late-night radio shows paint him to be. This was something ancient, something that walked like it carried every winter it had ever survived. He moved forward without rushing, looked at the cub, the snake, the frozen parents. Then he raised one arm, one massive, tree-thick arm, and brought his fist down like thunder. The snake didn't stand a chance. One hit. That's all it took. It flew, limp, bone-cracked, disappearing into the underbrush like a nightmare chased back into its hole. The cub lay there gasping, tiny chest fluttering. And the lions, they didn't attack. They didn't flee. They just watched. Like I did. Bigfoot didn't look at them. Or me. He knelt beside the cub, that massive form folding down with surprising gentleness, reached out one long, calloused hand and rested it on the cub's back. Not pushing, not claiming, just steady. I don't know how long he stayed like that. Long enough for the cub to stop shaking. Long enough for the mother to finally step forward and pull her baby toward her. And when she did, he stood, turned, walked back into the trees like nothing had happened. But just before he vanished, he looked back, not at the lions, at me. And I saw it, clear as day, in that one glance. He knew loss. He knew what it was to watch something small and helpless slip through your fingers. He wasn't saving a lion. He was doing something older, deeper, like he'd been trying to rewrite something that once went wrong. Maybe even with his own. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing that cry again. Not the cubs, but the roar that had started it all. It echoed through the woods, across the ridge, down into whatever corner of me still believed in things bigger than I could understand. I know what I saw. I don't care if no one else believes it. I saw a creature step out of myth and into mercy. I saw something wild choose compassion over instinct. And I think maybe that's what it's always been doing. Not hiding, just waiting for the moment we're quiet enough to notice. I don't know when I stopped expecting anyone to knock on my door. Out here, you learn to live with silence. It becomes a kind of company. The creak of pine, the low moan of wind through the tin roof, the old floorboards stretching under the weight of memory. I'd grown into that quiet like a second skin. 22 years on this land, and not a soul had stepped past the gate unless they were lost, drunk, or looking to die in peace. The cabin's just 4 walls, a roof, and the ghosts I let stay. I keep the fire low. It's enough to warm the bones, but not enough to make you forget the cold. The radio crackles sometimes, mostly static and old gospel stations. I keep it on to remind myself the world's still out there. That afternoon, the light was strange. Golden, but tired. Like the sun had been running all day and now it was leaning back, breathless over the ridge. I was sitting at my table with the radio humming, working the edge of a bullet between my fingers. I still cut my own rounds. Habit, mostly. Doesn't matter how many years pass since you needed a thing. Your hands remember. There's a photo by the window. Me, younger. My wife. Hair curled just right for Sunday service. And Connor. Lord, he was still smiling in that picture. Wide as anything. We'd just got the old Jeep back then. Still had the Park Service logo on the side. He thought it was the coolest thing in the world, riding shotgun with his daddy through the trees. I blinked and the room shifted. It always does when the light hits that photo. That's when I heard it. Not on the radio, outside. A sound I hadn't heard in a quarter of a century. Low. Primal. Not quite a growl. Not quite a scream. Like something ripping out of the throat of the world. My whole body went cold. That sound. It was the same one from the day Connor vanished. The exact same. I turned off the radio. Stood up slow. My boots scraped against the old pine floor like thunder. I stepped outside, breath clouding in the air, even though it wasn't that cold. Something in the wind had changed. Something just beneath the noise of the forest. I followed the sound, down the ridge, past the rusted-out truck that never ran, past the blackberry bramble that grows too wild every summer. The ground was soft, not from rain, from something else, like the earth itself had exhaled too hard. That's where I saw the prints. Not lion, not bear, huge, deeper than anything natural, 5 toes, wider than my boot. Each one pressed into the soil like a memory refusing to fade. There was blood, too. A smear across bark, a few dark drops soaking into the leaves. And something else. Claw marks? No, not claws, nails, human-shaped, but too long, too wide apart. They dug into the bark like someone had slipped, caught themselves, left a part of their fear behind. I don't know how long I stood there. My breath was thin. My ears were ringing with the weight of something I couldn't name. Then I turned back. That night I opened the old chest. Hadn't touched it in years. It still smelled of old paper and mold, and the past I kept trying to seal away. Inside, files, police reports, ranger notes, statements. Missing child. Connor Rourke, age 9, last seen near Hollow Ridge Trail. That was all they could ever say. But there was something else, too. Tucked between pages like a secret nobody wanted to find. A folded piece of notebook paper, yellowed at the edges. Connor's handwriting, I'd know it anywhere. Just a sketch. Scribbled fast with a blunt pencil. A figure, big, covered in lines that looked like fur. The face was blank, but the hands were open. Underneath, he'd written, "It didn't hurt me. It helped me." My throat locked. There were more notes, things I'd never seen before. It gave me water when I was lost. It talks with hands. It's not alone. My hands were shaking. He'd tried to tell me. All those years, the dreams, the drawings, the questions he used to ask about monsters and angels. I told him to let it go. I told him to stop making things up. And then he was gone. Not a trace, not a scream, just gone. I blamed the mountain, the wildlife, myself, God, anyone and anything that wasn't the thing he tried to show me. Now I was standing in the dark, holding proof that maybe, just maybe, he'd been trying to tell the truth. My boy didn't get taken. He got found. I closed the chest. My knees gave out, and I sat there on the floor, letting the fire burn low, letting the tears come. First time in a long time I let them fall. "I should have believed you," I whispered. "I should have gone with you." Outside, something howled again. Quieter this time. Not pain, not rage. A call. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid of what might be calling back. Not because I understood it, but because I finally knew. It wasn't trying to be feared. It was trying to be heard, and I had spent too long being deaf. I don't think Mira or Caleb had any idea what they were walking into that morning. I sure as hell didn't. The forest had that look again, like it was holding its breath. Mira was snapping photos of broken limbs, Caleb tracking soil imprints with his usual quiet focus in the air. It felt tighter than it should have. We were out where the fire trail bends near Split Rock, just off that old logging road the county never bothered to repave. I hadn't seen human boot tracks for weeks, but the crows were restless. That's how I knew something had bled here. The smell came first. Not rotting, not quite, but raw, coppery, thick in the lungs. Caleb muttered something under his breath, crouched low, then pointed at the brush. Mira followed his gesture, camera raised. What they saw stopped both of them cold. A python, torn in half like someone had tried to wring it out like laundry. Spine cracked, midsection twisted so unnaturally it looked sculpted by something that didn't understand anatomy, or didn't care. I'd worked as a ranger long enough to know what mountain cats could do. This wasn't that. The three of us circled it like an altar. Blood soaked the undergrowth. One side of the brush looked flattened, pressed down hard, and along the edge, prints. Big ones. I saw Mira go pale. Caleb looked at me like I was supposed to say something to make it make sense, but I had nothing. We followed the broken limbs. A trail cut through branches 6, maybe 7 feet high. Mira held out her arm, measuring the snapped wood against her height. Caleb crouched again, brushing fingers over the ground. "Barefoot," he said. "No claws, no pads, just toes. 5. Heavy gait. Real heavy." His voice was tight. I watched the wind stir the leaves. Nothing moved in the trees. We kept going, not talking much. The air had the kind of stillness that makes your skin crawl. The path curved behind an outcropping, and there, where the ferns thinned, stood a cluster of acacias, older than the others. I stopped walking. My chest got tight. That tree line, it was too familiar. Years ago, Connor and I used to come here. He'd sit with his little notepad, drawing whatever came to mind. Trees, birds, sometimes monsters. He liked the quiet. Said it helped him think. That was before he stopped drawing altogether. Before the nightmares. I told the others I needed a break. Let them move ahead. When they were far enough, I veered off the trail. My boots sank into moss and memory. The tree Connor loved most was still there. Tall, twisted, bark peeling like old paint. I crouched down and ran my hand along the dirt beneath it. Nothing at first. Then, something hard. I dug with my fingers until I found it. A tin box, rusted, bent at one corner. My hands shook as I pried it open. Inside, one of his sketchbooks. Smaller than I remembered. The paper smelled of mildew and years. I flipped through slowly, page after page of strange drawings. Long-limbed creatures. Shadows, but not violent, not nightmares. There was affection in the lines. One sketch showed the creature holding out a hand. Another showed it kneeling by a stream, cupping water toward something small, maybe a child. Then, a note folded in half, written in that messy scrawl only a kid could make. It didn't scare me. It helped me. It was lonely, too. My throat closed up. I sat back, the forest around me spinning just a little. All those nights Connor tried to explain, all the times I told him to stop making up stories, to let it go. He wasn't lying. He was remembering. Back on the trail, Mira was calling my name. I stuffed the box into my pack and returned without a word. She said they'd found more tracks, deeper this time, leading down toward the gully. But I couldn't focus. My mind was stuck on that sketch, on the hands, on the silence. That night back at the cabin, I opened up the old drawer in the desk, pulled out Connor's first crayon set, the one I'd tucked away after the funeral because I couldn't bear to see them without thinking of his little fingers holding them tight, drawing lines that didn't stay in the lines. I set them next to the tin box on the table. The fire crackled low. I thought about what that thing must have looked like through a child's eyes. Not as a monster, not a beast to fear. Just another lost soul in the woods, trying to make contact the only way it knew how. I opened one of my field journals and turned to a blank page. Started copying his sketches line by line, tracing the same curves. Feeling, for the first time in decades, like maybe I wasn't alone in this story after all. Maybe Connor hadn't vanished into nothing. Maybe something found him. Maybe something kept him safe, even just for a moment. And I began to wonder if that something still remembered him. The radio hissed, static, then a flicker of sound. A low hum, like breath across a microphone. I froze, turned the volume up. The hum didn't change, didn't grow louder, but it wasn't random. It had rhythm, like a code. like a song with no melody. I closed my eyes and listened. Something out there was speaking. Not in words, but in memory, and I wasn't ready. Not yet. But I was starting to understand what it had been trying to say all along. They weren't from here. I could tell by the way their boots sounded. Too loud on wet leaves, too sure of themselves. That kind of confidence doesn't last in these woods. Not when the trees don't speak back. Not when the land listens better than it forgives. I'd been hearing gunfire the past few nights. Small bursts. Echoes bouncing off the canyons like a pack of dogs fighting in the dark. I figured someone was hunting without a license, but when I spotted the smoke curling up behind the eastern ridge, I knew it wasn't just poachers after a quick buck. They'd set up camp deep, too deep, and the game they were after wasn't deer. That night the air went still. No owls, no crickets. Even the coyotes shut up. I stepped onto the porch and looked toward the tree line. Clouds low, moon thin as a scythe. I didn't need binoculars. The scream tore through the forest like it was trying to rip out the roots. Not human, not animal. Something in between. A sound too big to belong to anything that bled red. I didn't move at first. Just stood there gripping the railing while my heart raced in slow, heavy thumps. Then I turned back inside, grabbed the rifle, checked the chamber, packed what I needed, field knife, headlamp, the old canteen Connor once carved his initials into. I didn't say a word, just left the fire burning low and stepped into the dark. I followed the sound across the dry creek, up past the old water tower where the bats used to nest. My boots sank in mud I hadn't expected. Fresh, sticky. Something heavy had come through here. I moved, careful, slow, letting the woods tell me where not to step. That's when I saw the first snare. Steel jaw, teeth rusted, but the chain, new. Buried beneath pine needles like a trap door in the woods. They'd lined the trail with them, hoping to catch something desperate. But what they'd caught wasn't desperate. It was angry. The clearing was lit with flood lamps rigged to a loud generator. Shadows danced long on every side. I stayed just beyond the edge, crouched in the brush. 4 men, all geared up like military dropouts playing soldier. One had a camera rig strapped to his shoulder. Another sat by the fire, scrolling through his phone like this was a picnic. But the other 2, they were standing over something. Something on the ground. At first I thought it was a bear. The size, the fur. But then it moved, struggled. One massive leg caught in the trap, blood soaking into the dirt. It wasn't roaring anymore, just breathing hard, raspy, labored. I saw its hand, yes, hand, clench and then fall limp. Fingers long, knuckles swollen, skin torn. My mouth went dry. They'd caught it, and it wasn't dead. One of the men kicked at the body. "Still alive," he muttered. "Tough son of a bitch." The other guy lifted his phone and started filming. "Get closer," he said. "We're gonna make the front page of Cryptid Watchers Weekly." I wanted to scream. I wanted to raise my rifle and put a bullet between their eyes, but I stayed low. Watched. Waited. Because that's what the woods taught me. You don't act until the wind shifts. The creature coughed. The sound stopped everyone cold. The guy with the camera jerked back, shaking. The one with the trap key reached for something. A dart gun, I think. But his hands were trembling. The thing raised its head. Its eyes met mine. I don't know how it saw me in the dark, but it did. Not with fear. Not with rage. With something else. Recognition, maybe. Or the kind of silence that only comes after you've screamed everything inside you empty. And then, it did something I'll never forget. It lifted one arm. Not in defense, not in attack, just lifted it slowly, and laid its hand on its own chest, then reached it out toward me. Not the men, not the fire, me. Like it remembered, like it trusted me. I stepped forward. The nearest man spun toward the sound of my boot cracking a branch. He raised his weapon, but I was already moving. I swung the butt of my rifle hard, caught him in the temple. He dropped like a sack of wet rope. The second one turned, yelling. But the creature roared. Louder than before, louder than the first scream. The whole clearing shook, lights flickered, the trees answered back. The men scattered, like children caught breaking something sacred. I dropped to my knees beside the creature. Blood coated the fur near its thigh, soaking into the trap. It didn't fight me, just stared, breathing shallow. And then, so gently it nearly stopped my heart, it placed its hand on my shoulder. Not gripping, not clawing, as if to say, I knew you'd come. The touch, it was like fire and snow at the same time. I couldn't speak. All I could do was nod, reach down, and begin working the trap's hinge with shaking hands. The metal bit hard, but I didn't care. I was somewhere else, back in time, holding my son's hand, listening to him describe the tall, hairy man who doesn't talk but listens, the one I'd dismissed, the one I'd feared. Now he was here, bleeding, and I was the only one left to answer. Behind me, the woods crackled. Something moved in the shadows. But I didn't turn. I stayed right there, hand on its fur, breath shallow, eyes wet. Because for the first time in 25 years, I wasn't running from the past. I was kneeling in front of it. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Not with the weight of that thing's hand still on my shoulder. Not with the sound of its breath growing thinner by the minute. I dragged it, God help me. I dragged that bleeding, near-unconscious body through half a mile of underbrush and deadfall with every ounce of strength I had left in this old frame. My back screamed. My joints locked up like rusted bolts. But I didn't stop. I wouldn't. Not this time. I set up camp in a thicket near the dry ravine, far from the firelight those bastards had been using. It was colder than usual, and the pine needles crackled under my boots like brittle bones. I wrapped its leg in strips of canvas from my old pack and soaked it with boiled pine leaves and the last of the liquor from my flask. It wasn't antiseptic, but it was all I had. I kept the fire low and the flames close. The creature didn't fight me, didn't flinch. Just lay there, breathing through its teeth, one massive arm across its chest, like it was trying to hold something broken inside from falling out. At some point, I started humming. I don't even know why. It just came out. A lullaby I used to sing to Connor when he was little, when he'd wake up crying after dreaming about shadows in the closet or things in the trees. Back then I'd hold him and whisper the words like a promise that nothing would hurt him as long as I was there. I never thought I'd be singing it to something covered in matted fur, bleeding out under the stars, shaking like a child in a thunderstorm. But I did. And it listened. The moon slid behind the clouds and everything turned silver. That's when I saw it move. Just a small twitch in the fingers, then a shiver down its spine. I leaned closer, watching its face. The eyes were still closed, but the breath was steadier, less ragged. Like it wasn't just surviving anymore, like it was choosing to stay. I worked through the night, cut a walking stick out of birch for myself, used the rest of the branches to build a makeshift splint for its leg, tied it with leather strips from my belt. Every motion was slow, deliberate. My hands remembered things I thought I'd forgotten, field medicine from my ranger days, knots I learned back in '77 from a Vietnam vet who never could sleep unless he was outside. And all the while, I kept talking to it. Not with words I expected it to understand, just voice. Soft, even, like I was talking to myself, or maybe to the silence between us. I told it about Connor, about the last day I saw him, about the guilt that rotted me from the inside for decades. I said things I hadn't said out loud in 25 years. It blinked once. I swear it did. Just one slow, heavy lid sliding over a dark eye, then open again, watching me. Then it did something that made my heart damn near stop. It nodded, just once, small, but deliberate, like a man acknowledging another man's pain. It didn't run, didn't growl, just lay back and closed its eyes again. That moment, God, that moment, was heavier than any shot I'd ever fired, any storm I'd ever braced through. It wasn't just an animal. Not to me, not anymore. It was a survivor. Same as me. Around dawn, I fed the fire again, added some pine cones for heat and scent. The forest was starting to stir, birds cautiously returning to their branches. I rubbed my hands together, breath fogging. My fingers were raw and sticky with dried blood, my back on fire, but I felt still. I looked at it one more time. That face, the jawline almost human, covered in years of dirt and wilderness. But it wasn't just the face. It was the way its hand twitched near the firelight, like it was reaching for something familiar. I whispered, "You're safe, for now." It didn't move, but I knew it heard me. I leaned back against the trunk behind me, exhaustion folding over me like a wet blanket. My eyelids sank heavy, and for a second I let them close. I dreamed of Connor, but not like before. Not the nightmare versions where I was running and couldn't find him. This time, he was sitting in a clearing, drawing, same crumpled notebook in his lap. He looked up and smiled. "Dad," he said, "he's not what they think." I reached for him, but he stood and pointed past me. And when I turned around, I saw it. Not the creature, but the woods, alive, not menacing, but watching, waiting. I woke with a gasp, the sun stabbing through the trees. The fire was low. My joints crackled as I stood. The creature hadn't moved, still breathing slow and steady. I knelt beside it, reached out. Its hand was warm, warmer than I expected. I said softly, "If anyone asks, I saw an angel." I felt the corner of my mouth lift. Didn't have wings, just fur and eyes that listened. And I believed it. I truly did. Because no man, no beast, no figment in the woods had ever made me feel more seen. And somehow, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. I knew the peace wouldn't last. Nothing ever does out here. You get a moment, maybe two if you're lucky, just enough to start believing maybe the world will let you breathe again. And then the hammer falls. This time, it came in the form of a video. 18 seconds. Grainy, shaky, shot just before dawn. The bastard who filmed it must have snuck back into the woods when the others ran, probably hiding behind a tree while I was trying to stop the bleeding. You could see the creature. Not clearly, but enough. Enough to get people excited. Enough to make the wrong kind of folks start sniffing around. You could hear my voice too, low and cracked, whispering something to it, like I was talking to a dying friend. And maybe I was. By noon, the town buzzed. Ashevale Ridge doesn't usually care about much past church gossip and fuel prices. But this was wildfire. The video hit some cryptid blog, got picked up by a local news affiliate out of Boise, and by the next day, we had camera crews parked outside the diner. I watched it unfold from my porch, radio hissing in the background, the same static that had carried that strange rhythm just days ago. The rhythm was gone now, swallowed by the noise. I tried to lay low, but they came anyway. Mira and Caleb showed up that evening, dust on their boots, shoulders tight. They weren't holding microphones, thank God, but they didn't look like hikers anymore either. They looked like people with something to prove. "We need to talk," Mira said. Her voice was flatter than usual, like she was still deciding whether or not to be angry. I nodded, led them inside. The fire was low. The cabin smelled of pine smoke and old leather. I poured coffee that neither of them touched. Caleb stared at the wall. Mira stood, arms crossed, her eyes flicking to the tin box on my desk. "You knew," she said. I didn't deny it. She picked up the sketchbook, flipped through it slow, like touching something sacred. "This is Connor's?" "Yeah." She looked up. "He saw it too." "He saw it first." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, heavy with all the years I'd spent not believing the one person who'd tried to tell me the truth. Caleb finally spoke, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "We found claw marks on the cliffs near Devil's Hollow, but they weren't claw marks. They were handprints, deep, too deep." Mira reached into her coat and pulled out a photo. Old, worn at the edges. "Shoshone territory," she said. long before the Park Service put up borders. This was their holy place. The photo showed a cave wall covered in etchings, symbols, animals, and in the center, something tall, something hairy, arms raised not in threat, but in welcome. I stared at it for a long time. "You think it's the same?" I asked. She nodded. "I think it always was." I stood, walked to the window. Outside, the woods swayed under a rising wind. Somewhere in those trees, it was still out there, wounded, hiding, watching. I didn't know how long I had before someone found it again, and this time, they wouldn't run. They'd bring darts, cages, fire. "They'll kill it," I said. Caleb looked up. "Not if we move it." I turned to him. He was serious. "You said it trusts you," he added. "Take it somewhere safe." I thought about that. About the place Connor used to draw. The one with the arching rock and the waterfall, the spot he called the end of the noise. I remembered the way he said it, like it was a promise. Like if you could just get there, the world would finally shut up. "I think I know where," I said. We spent the rest of the night packing. Rations, bandages, water. I dug out the old tarp I'd kept from my days in the service, patched it with duct tape and canvas. It'd have to do. The air smelled like snow, though it was too early in the season. The mountain had that feel, like it was bracing for something. Before dawn, we moved. I led the way. Mira walked beside the creature, her hand never far from its shoulder. Caleb took rear, rifle slung but loaded. The thing limped but didn't resist. It didn't make a sound. Not when the pine needles dug into its wounds, not when the slope steepened and the wind cut through us like glass. It just kept moving. Somewhere along the trail, Mira whispered, "It's afraid." I nodded. "So am I," I said. We reached the edge of the cliff before midday. The view stretched wide, a canvas of gold and green. Below us, the cave system Connor used to draw in his notebooks yawned open like a secret mouth. The Shoshone once called it the place where spirits sleep. I never believed that. Until now. We set up camp again, just outside the entrance. The creature lay down, curled slightly, breathing shallow. I watched it for a long time. The wind picked up, scattering dust across the fire. Then I stood, walked to the edge of the ridge, and I knew this was where it had to end, or maybe begin. Not with proof, not with headlines, but with silence. The kind that protects what needs to be left alone. I turned back toward the cave. Tomorrow we'd take it down there. But tonight, we let it rest. And for the first time in weeks, the forest didn't feel like it was waiting for something. It just listened. They lit the forest on fire. Not a brush burn. Not a backcountry-controlled blaze. This was rage. Gasoline and lighters and the stink of men who think if they scorch the land hard enough, the truth will crawl out screaming. I could smell it from the cave's mouth before I even saw the smoke. Sap cracking in the heat, pine turning to charcoal. Every tree screaming in its own silent way. They weren't just hunting anymore. They were erasing. We'd stayed hidden the night before, curled deep in the cave system beneath the ridge, where the air was cool and the echoes made your breath feel borrowed. The creature, he'd stopped flinching when I touched his shoulder, started sleeping longer. His leg was healing, not fast, but enough. There was a stillness in him I hadn't seen before, like he knew we were close to something that might let him exhale. But then the wind shifted, smoke poured down through the trees like floodwater in reverse, and behind it, the roar of machines. Boots, metal, chainsaws maybe, or something worse. I grabbed my pack, tucked the journal into my jacket, looked at Mira and Caleb, both already on their feet. No words needed. We knew. We had to move. We tried the back path first. Tight corridor through limestone shelves and root-twisted gullies. But the smoke followed fast, thickening the air, pushing us uphill. Caleb stayed ahead, clearing brush with a hatchet. Mira right behind the creature, steadying him when his steps faltered. I took the rear, rifle slung, sweat stinging my eyes, lungs burning like I'd swallowed fire. We crested a ridge just as the sun cracked through the smoke. That orange light. It didn't feel like dawn. It felt like judgment, like the sky itself had turned to ash. We could hear shouting below, not clear, not English even, just the sound of men whipped into frenzy by fear and adrenaline. Someone fired a shot. Close. We split. Caleb waved us left, drawing the attention. His boots tore through dry pine needles, leading them off like bait on a hook. I wanted to stop him, wanted to scream, but Mira pulled me forward, her eyes sharp, full of that same fire Connor used to get when he knew I was wrong. We ducked into a ravine, the sides steep and narrow. The creature limped faster than I thought he could, using the rock walls for support. Smoke spilled in behind us, and through it, more voices. Laughter. Someone shouted, "It's cornered!" I pushed harder. My legs didn't feel like mine anymore, just old sticks doing what they were told. Mira slipped once, scraped her arm on the rock, didn't stop. We climbed until our fingers bled, until the smoke was behind us again. Then I heard it. A shot, then another, then silence. I turned around. The creature had stopped. He was looking back. His chest rose and fell hard. His eyes locked onto mine, and then, without a sound, he turned and went back down the path. I tried to stop him, grabbed his arm. He shook his head, not violently, just enough, like a father telling a child it's not his turn to carry the weight. Then he ran, downhill, toward the flames. We followed. I don't remember how I got there. The trees were blurring, the ground unsteady. I kept seeing flashes, sunlight on fur, Mira's hair whipping in the wind, the outline of rifles in the haze. When we reached the clearing, Caleb was down, shot in the shoulder, crawling. And the creature, he stood between him and the hunters, full height, roaring so loud the leaves ripped from branches. The men froze. I saw their faces twist. Every story they'd ever heard now breathing fire in front of them. Guns lowered, not from peace, from fear. Then someone raised a flare and threw it. It caught the dry brush like it had been waiting. The fire snapped up the hill fast. Trees groaned, birds screamed out of the canopy. The heat slammed into us like a truck. The creature didn't flinch. He turned, lifted Caleb, full grown, bleeding, and carried him like a child through the wall of flame. I followed. Couldn't see, could barely breathe. But I followed. Branches cracked overhead. Embers floated like fireflies gone mad. Mira stayed at my side, both of us stumbling, coughing, eyes watering. We made it to the creek bed, cold water and wet stone. The creature lay Caleb down in the shallows, collapsed beside him. I dropped to my knees. His fur was scorched, arms trembling, eyes closed. I put my hand on his shoulder. He opened his eyes, smiled, I swear to God. He smiled, and then he looked at me like he remembered everything, like he saw Connor, like he forgave me. I whispered, "You came back for him." He closed his eyes again, didn't move. I sat there in the smoke, in the river, in the ash and ruin and mercy. And I remembered the day Connor got lost. I remembered how I screamed his name until my voice broke, how I thought I'd never forgive myself. And now, here he was, not my son, but something sacred, something old, something brave enough to carry the weight I never could. The trees were burning, but in that moment, something else was being saved. The forest's been quiet ever since, not empty, just settled, like a breath finally let go. We got Caleb out that night, barely, smoke-stained and half-conscious, his arm twisted up in a sling, bleeding through the gauze, but alive. Mira didn't speak for hours, just kept watching the tree line like she expected it to move again, like something might still step out and pull the world apart. But nothing did. Not after the fire. Not after him. The creature, he disappeared that night. No trail. No sound. No proof. Just gone. Not like he was running. More like he was done. The morning after, I walked back up the ridge alone. Ash coated the dirt like frost. Everything smelled like ruin, like the inside of a burned-out church. The trees were black skeletons now, still smoldering in their roots. I walked slow, boots sinking into softened earth. Birds hadn't returned yet. Even the insects were gone. But I kept walking, like my bones needed to see it for themselves. That it was over. I reached the edge of the creek where it all ended. There was no blood, no footprints, just one thing, pressed into the mud, right at the bend in the water. A single handprint, wide, deep, almost deliberate. He left it for me, and I knew what it meant. Don't follow. I turned back, didn't look again. The weeks after, the news cycle chewed itself up. The video was everywhere for a while. Screenshots and blurry speculation. Talking heads. Cryptid confirmed. Legend of Hollow Ridge. They asked for interviews. I didn't answer. Mira didn't either. Caleb stayed up in Missoula, said he was done with the woods. I didn't blame him. Eventually, the video got buried under newer noise. It always does. People need a monster more than they want the truth. But not me. I rebuilt the porch, replaced the broken rungs on the railing, replanted the sage along the fence line. I patched the hole in the roof that's been there since last spring. The cabin feels quieter now, not empty, just full of something I don't need to name. I visit the edge of the woods every now and then. Never go past the line. Never call out. I just leave things. Fresh water, dried meat, sometimes an old photograph, not as an offering, more like a thank you. One morning I woke to find a new pile of stones stacked beside the porch. 7, perfectly balanced, too clean, too neat to be wind or animal. I left it there. Still haven't touched it. The only thing I did change was Connor's grave. Not the real one. He never had one. Just a cedar marker I'd carved 25 years ago and stuck beneath a tree out of guilt more than faith. But now it stands beside the cabin, where the grass grows taller than it should, where the wind is always just a little warmer. I carved a new name into it. Connor Rourke, lost, then found. And beneath it I wrote, "You were believed." I don't tell people about him anymore. Not because I'm afraid they won't believe, but because it's not theirs. This story, it belongs to the forest now, to silence, to the part of the world that doesn't need our words to be real. And yet, some days when the fog rolls in just right, I swear I see something at the tree line, tall, still, watching. But I never move toward it. I just tip my hat, take a breath, and let the forest breathe back. One morning, a boy came through with his mother. Tourists, passing through Hollow Ridge on their way up north. He stopped at the sign out front, where I'd added a new wooden post. Just 4 words carved into it. Land of the Unnamed. He looked up at me and asked, "Is it true?" His mother started to correct him, but I held up a hand and smiled. I knelt beside him. "You don't need to believe," I said. "Just listen." And he did, still as stone. Like maybe, somewhere deep down, something inside him already knew. Some stories aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be felt. They linger not in headlines or photographs, but in the quiet between breaths, in the rustle of leaves that suddenly sound like footsteps, or in the stillness that makes you turn your head, even when nothing's there. The world is older than our words for it, wiser than our explanations. And sometimes, if we listen closely, not with ears, but with something deeper, we can feel its pulse beneath the noise of our daily lives. There are truths too sacred for science, too tender for spectacle. Truths that don't ask to be proven, only protected. What we call myth may simply be memory in disguise. What we fear might just be what we've forgotten how to understand. Not every shadow in the trees hides danger. Some hold stories, some hold mercy, some hold mirrors. This isn't a tale about monsters. It's about recognition, about seeing what's been overlooked, listening where the world tells us to ignore. It's about second chances and the strength it takes to believe again when belief costs something. It's about letting go of the need to name everything and learning instead to respect what chooses not to be named. In a time where everything demands proof, maybe the most radical thing we can do is simply trust. Not blindly, but with reverence. Not to explain away mystery, but to preserve it. Because what we protect says more about us than what we conquer. So, if something moves in the distance, if a sound rises that doesn't fit the logic of your world, maybe, just maybe, it's not a threat. Maybe it's an invitation to wonder, to soften, to remember that we are not alone here, never were. Thank you for sitting with this story. If it stirred something in you, anything at all, we'd love to know. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. And if you'd like to walk with us again through stories that listen more than they speak, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe. The wild is still out there, and sometimes it waits for those who choose to listen.